Hey everyone, welcome to my little arcade at home. I've got a few candy cabinets and the Chewlix cabinet over here in the corner, which will be the subject of this video today. It's a clone of a Taito Vewlix cabinet, and this video will be a run through of the hardware modifications that I've made to it. I've made quite a few hardware mods to it. It'll be part one of a three-part series, where part one will be the cabinet and the hardware I've changed on the cabinet. Part two will be the TTX3 unit that's in it and the modifications I've done to the hardware on that. And part three will be the software component of the artax multi, which the mods I've made and the changes that I've made. So this is my Chewlix cabinet. It says it's a Vewlix, but it's actually a clone. It's a clone out of China. That's where the name Chewlix comes from. Vewlix from China. Chewlix, get it? So it looks pretty standard, except for maybe the little I/O panel there. But there's quite a few mods that I've done to this cabinet, so I'll go through those one at a time. It's not really meant to be a guide. It's not meant to be a guide at all. It's just to share that some of the things I've done. Maybe you get some ideas and some things you might want to do to your own cabinet. First up, the control panel. So this is actually an original Taito Vewlix cabinet panel. I got this out of Japan, used just a single player one. I don't think they ever made double player ones officially, but this is actually the original one. You can't really see it, but it's got a lot of scratches and blemishes on it. But it was a drop-in fit. I didn't have to make any adjustments to make it fit. And next up I have the sub I/O panel, which is just a little panel that you can buy and it fits in place of the panel that's already there. You just get some screws and the holes are already done. It's got a volume dial on it, which you can see just there, which I connected. I'll show you inside how I connected it. The volume dial only controls the four speakers here. It controls, we'll get the focus. It only controls those four speakers. It doesn't control the sub inside of the cab. It just controls those four speakers. These buttons, these white buttons, don't do anything yet, but I'm going to wire those up later. And then the two USB ports, which are just wired into the TTX3 unit inside, so I can just connect any USB devices I want to those. I updated the speakers, which are the four speakers around the monitor. I used the Dayton Audio 3-inch speakers for those. I'll link the model in the description. These are much better than the stock speakers. The stock speakers that came in this cabinet were really, really bad. They just sounded awful. These ones are quite good. Next up we have the second LCD screen, which is used for the dynamic marquees and the pinball DMDs. I had to cut a section out of the metal in between the speakers to make that fit properly and get it installed behind there. The marquees will switch with the screensaver as the game changes, and it also switches as you cycle through the games as well. I haven't done all the marquees yet, but I've got quite a lot of them done. Thanks to LemmingDev for the code to make this work. We'll have a look at some of the other. You can see marquees there as I cycle through the games. It's a pretty neat feature. I really like this second marquee LCD. I'll just show you it also working as a pinball DMD. You can see it works as a pinball DMD as well. And the swap is automatic. There's no configuration or stuffing around when you change and start a pinball game. It's all configured in the script to make everything work properly. And then when you exit the game, it goes back to marquees. Anyways, that's an example of the marquee working. You can see the Taito TTX3 unit there. It's actually just a case. Everything inside has been replaced, but that will be the focus of the second video. Down here we've got an amplifier and a subwoofer, which is way too powerful for this cabinet. I like it, but it's just way overkill. You don't need this much sub or amp, but I'll pull the unit out and show you what it is shortly. You can sort of see through the back there the power supply and the wiring, but I'll go around the back and I'll show the whole thing from the back shortly. Anyway, that's what it looks like from the front. So here's what it looks like with the TTX3 unit removed. You can see it's just an empty space with a shelf. There's the unit itself. So you just slide out the shelf here, and then we can see underneath the car subwoofer and the car audio amp, which, like I said, is way overkill. This amp and sub will vibrate every piece of the cabinet, shake the windows in your house. You just don't need anywhere near that level of bass. It ruins, you know, the games. This particular sub though is really good because it has its own volume control, which is here. So this lets me independently adjust the volume of the sub, and it also lets you adjust the crossover and the phase of the sub without having to touch any dials on the amp or anything, which is really handy because I've got this dial here for my speakers, which controls the speakers on the cabinet, and then I've got an independent controller which controls the bass volume. For a system like this where there's a lot of different games, some games will have music which is really bassy and it really drowns out the sound effects. And sometimes you just want to turn the sub volume down on its own. Whereas other games don't have over-bassed music, and you might want to just turn, you know, and you might want to turn the sub up a little bit so, you know, you get more bass in the punches and various sound effects of the game. But some games you can't do that, like King of Fighters 2002 Unlimited Matches 1, where the bass is very drony in the music and it really drowns out everything else, so I like to turn the bass down, and it just works really well. You can see my power supply there, but I'll go through this in more detail when I flip the cab around. So basically from the front, that's the sub and the amp. They're on the lower shelf, and the TTX3 goes on the upper shelf. So here's the cabinet from behind. It looks like a bit of a mess, but this is actually a much better way to get into it, to work on it and see how things are set up. So you'll see that I've got a power supply here. I did replace the power supply in the cabinet with a PC power supply. This power supply only really supplies 5 volts and 12 volts to the I/O board and to the coin mech. That's all it does, because everything else is independently powered in this cabinet, and I'm not running game boards off it or anything like that, so a PC power supply is fine. The power supply that came in this cabinet was kind of dodgy and I didn't really want to use it, so I just got a high quality PC power supply, and I'm pretty confident that that will be able to power everything fine. And the fan in this power supply is much quieter than the fan in the original power supply. Here's the sub and the amp again. You can see a little bit of cable management. pretty simple. There's not a lot of stuff in there. There's a small power distribution board. There's 2 power sockets there. I do have another one which I'll show you shortly. But that's really it for the lower part of the cabinet. It is a jammer wired cabinet. I will show you shortly when I whip the control panel open where I've got the I/O board, which you can't see from here. Here's the back of the monitor with the cabinet open. It's a 32-inch 4K LG screen. All I did was took off the stand and I used the L brackets, which is a little bit difficult to see there. I used the L brackets from the original monitor to sort of clamp it in. And it's actually sitting, I don't know if you can see it, but it's actually sitting on a piece of aluminium which props the screen up just to the perfect height so it lines up at the front. So I didn't want the screen to be floating, so I had to try and bear all the weight to hold it up. So these 2 brackets here, these little L brackets here, they just stop it from falling backward. All the weight, it's just sitting on this little piece of aluminium, which I'll see if I can capture it. It's nothing special, it's just a small piece of square aluminium. Yeah, it's hard to get the focus on it. That's hot glue that's holding it in. And you can see the speaker boxes there. They're the speaker boxes that came with the cabinet. And there is my extra power board. Sorry, the focus is a bit difficult with this camera. And you'll see here, this little board here, which is wired up to the marquee LCD. That controls the marquee LCD, and that's the adjustments for the marquee LCD. I just hot glued them to the back of the monitor case. Before I put this monitor in, I actually tried to decase another monitor, a brand new monitor, and I managed to smash it in the process. I went to all the trouble of decasing it, making up a bracket, lining it all up, and I put it all back together and it was all fine. And then there was a little piece of fluff in between the glass at the front and the monitor, so I had to take it all back out again, and I cleaned it. And then when I was about to put the monitor back in, I actually smashed the monitor. I just clipped the edge of it and it smashed. So I just was over it at that point. So I had to buy a whole nother monitor, and then I decided to just leave the shell on it, which in my opinion is much better. If you're going to do it that way, I highly suggest just leaving the back of the shell on there and doing something like I did. Just use the L brackets to sort of screw into the side and just pinch the monitor in, like so. And then make sure it's propped up somehow, so you haven't got the brackets holding up any weight. It's just resting on a shelf effectively. So another mod I've done is I've installed pinball flipper buttons on the side of the control panel there, and I've done that on both sides. As you can see, I think you can see, there's one, there's 2, because I use this for pinball games a lot. Inside the control panel, let's take a look. You can see where I've wired the buttons up for the pinball flipper buttons. I just piggyback the wires off 2 of the buttons on the control panel that are already there. I do have buttons 7 and 8 ready to go for the multi. I just have to change the wiring, change some of the configs. Inside the control panel here, this is where I keep the I/O board. It's a little tricky. Oh, there you go. You can see it there. So that's the fast I/O board, and the jammer harness connects right there. Kind of like the original Taito Vewlix cabs do it. They have it over to the side. I just put it there to get it out of the road because it was forever moving around and there wasn't really a good spot for it. So I managed to get it there, and that's a good spot. And you can see here, I'll bring the light over. Actually, that's much better. This is actually a nudge sensor for the pinball games. So I can move the cabinet and it actually nudges the cabinet kind of like you would on a real pinball machine. It's not the same as a real pinball machine, but it's a similar effect. It's about as good as you're going to get. And you can see here the underside of that I/O panel. Nothing special really. Again, hot glue used to hold the nudge sensor down as well as the fast I/O board. You can see this a bit better here. That's better. You can see the coin mech here that came with the cabinet. When the coin mech arrived, I tried the local coins here and none of them worked. I tried a bunch of other coins they had. Sega coins, they didn't work. Taito coins, they didn't work. So I have no idea how to reprogram this coin mech. And I messaged the guy who I bought the cabinet from. He was not helpful. But then I bought a bunch of other coins, little Namco tokens that I just wanted to have. These tokens right here. And they worked perfectly. I didn't even have to reconfigure anything. So that was really lucky that now I've got all these coins that actually work in this coin mech. Which I was pleased about because, you know, who doesn't want a working coin mech? Okay, so just a summary of the mods here. So we've got the sub I/O panel, which has got USB ports and a volume control for the 4 speakers at the side of the monitor. The 4 speakers around the monitor have been upgraded. Those 4 up there. Got the marquee LCD, which also doubles as a pinball DMD for the games, for the pinball games. Have a 4K 60 FPS monitor installed. The original Taito Vewlix control panel. I've got the subwoofer installed. We've got the car amp as well installed with independent volume controls for the sub and the bass. And the pinball buttons installed on the side, as well as the nudge sensor for pinball inside the control panel, which works quite well. That's pretty much it for this cabinet. Sorry about the quality of the video. It's a little bit difficult to hold the camera in one hand and then go through the cab with the other hand. I really need to get a tripod. Maybe I'll do videos on my other cabinets, the candy cabinets, like this one and these ones. But let me know in the comments if you want to see videos on the other cabinets, the candy cabinets. If I get a tripod, I can go through them and probably do a much better video with better lighting. Also, don't forget, keep an eye out for part 2 and 3 of this video, because part 2, I'm going to take the X3 unit out and I'll dismantle that. I'll take it apart and show you all the mods I've done to that. And that'll be much better quality because I'll have better lighting and it'll be on the desk. And then the third part, I'm going to go through all the software and the mods I've done to the software, because I've kind of started porting most of it to 4K, which is a really tedious task, and getting as many games as I can to run at 4K. So keep an eye out for that down the track. That's about it. Thanks for watching.